about tonight is we get to discuss this at Sankofa, and we get to discuss it with someone who's definitely going to make themselves present in this conversation, and that's one of the founders of Sankofa, Holly Greenman. Holly is a wonderful filmmaker, and one of his focuses for the last 30 years has been on Maroon. Okay? And so he has traveled literally all over North America, South America, Central America, and places in between studying. So to have him here and to be able to do this conversation in this liberated space, in this house, that the people do, is really, really an honor. And I know your father would be pleased and honored that we're discussing this with you. My job is fairly simple. I need to keep the conversation going. You guys have to carry the conversation. And I don't think that's hard for you because you've lived the experience of this book. You've worked with it, you've worked with your father, and so we're going to be able to do that. I want to begin because there's a particular passage in the book that I think really opens our discussion tonight. And this is the chapter, this is the chapter Maroon, page 237, chapter 23. I'm only going to read a part of it. Maroons are refusers. They exist in the state of opposition to slavery. If you have your book, you can read along with me. If you don't have your book, you can get it before you leave, okay? They exist in a state of opposition to slavery. Throughout the centuries of conquest and exploitation that have marked our modern history, Maroons have been the embodiments of autonomy and independence. Their history spans centuries and continents. Any place that has seen slavery has seen Maroonage. But the stories of the Maroons have been mostly buried under books written by their captors and killers. In September 1977, there was a Maroon running loose in the Appalachian Mountains of Western Pennsylvania. Circumstances would force him to live rough, to lap water from puddles on the forest floor, to defecate in the open, and to eat live animals, and to wear his clothes to tatters. But every day that he remained at large, he was a king. With that, we're going to open the discussion. Sharon, tell us about, for folks who don't have the book, for folks who don't know the story of your father and the period he comes out of, his importance to people, whether they're incarcerated or not. Can you start by telling us about your father, his background, and his incarceration? And also we'll ask you to pick up.
Well, my father was born in Philadelphia at a time when, of course, things were segregated, the housing, as well as the economic status of most people in Philadelphia that were of color, so to speak. He grew up in the era of Frank Rizzo, who was the police chief, who then became the mayor of Philadelphia. But it was an oppressive time for people of color in Philly, not only with the cops, also he talks about how he was treated growing up in school, how teachers treated him with a nice slide face, but it was still the racism that they experienced right on the streets every day. So most of his life was tangled up into a gang where a lot of black men at that time, it was a rite of passage. At that time, I think it was the 40s, 50s coming up. And so much of his childhood was spent um, in gangs as well as being in reformatory schools for acting out for various reasons. But mostly his life was wrapped up in the gangs. I'm not sure if I'm missing something, Russ. Do you want to add on? Yeah. Okay. So then he met, of course, my mother, and who was not, she was a girl from the South, but he was still definitely wrapped up into that type of life until he ended up seeing Malcolm X in New York. And that kind of changed his perspective, but he was still wrapped up into the gang life. And it's hard to get away from that. And at some point, he did come full circle, but it came in, I think, with a killing that took place of a child, much like we've seen here in present day, police brutality and police killing youth. And he decided to come together, with the Black Unity Council, a group of people who had came together for the community to begin to challenge some of the injustice that was going on. And as a result, he then joined the Black Panther Party. So I'm not going to tell the whole story, but you can read the book too. But Russ, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered everything, and I kind of lost the question. What was it? Do you remember? We could refresh the question.
Just talking about Daddy and who he was.
I think you did a good job of covering, I guess, Daddy. Growing up in West Philly, gang culture, juvenile prison culture, doo-wopping, sitting on the corner culture, young black male, having a partner and getting her pregnant multiple times and having to, fend for the family and get a job, and a lot of the same things that young black men go through today. But in that turbulent time, and in a time where there was a level of brutality that was kind of unmatched in a lot of cities in America because of Frank Rizzo.
So one of the things, we had a discussion earlier today, one of the things I didn't add was the chapters that your father is talking about the gangs. He nails that, right? He nails it. And I'm saying he nails it because I'm from Philly as well, okay? I came up a few years after your father, but he nails that really well, how that gang culture existed. About the time that he was becoming political, that gang culture was being destroyed in Philly. They destroyed it with drugs and everything else, but he was definitely a product of the street. He became political. He joins the Black Panther Party, and he works with the Black Unity Council. There's an incident that will mark his life and will mark the life of really what we know about him in a way that you guys are going to end up being impacted about it. Can you talk about that part, Russell? Like, how did your father end up in jail this last time?
And yes. Okay. So yes. So as my sister was saying in a nutshell, my father is straddling the fence between gang culture and political education. And I love that life dictates also our kind of paths. And so this, in his life, dictated a path. This young kid was, for lack of better terms, stole a car, joyriding, ran in the back of his mom's house. The cops chased him, shot him in front of his mother. The mother stabbed the cops. The cops shot the boy, beat the mother, dragged her out. Everybody in the neighborhood was upset and demanded something to be done. My father and his friends got together. They retaliated. At the end of the night, one police officer dead, one wounded, and 4 of his comrades were caught on the scene or close to the scene, and him and another brother went on a run for years. But then my father was caught after that, traveling back to Philadelphia with other BLA members and Panthers, and in a safe house that wasn't so safe, and they were incarcerated then, and that's how he actually was incarcerated after the juvenile cases, if that makes any sense. Is that answering the question? Was that the question? Okay.
You're a little fast, but pretty good. Hey.
No. I will slow down. I'm used to doing that because of time constraints. Like I'm glad I have a little more time.
You got it. One of the things that, okay, so your father goes to jail. He's, I don't even remember how many years he got out of this thing, but he's gonna be in jail for a long time. He got to be in jail for a long time.
You got double life, that's a bunch of
Oh, God, long time. One of the things now, while he's in jail, there's a whole, America really is experiencing a period of militant Black power. He is a part of that. He acts that out in Philadelphia. He goes a route. Other Panthers, I think in fact, there's about the time, close to the time the Panther Party was fracturing. The bottom line is his actions were radical actions. And one of the things I love about this is your father continued to, throughout his incarceration, continue to see himself as a revolutionary and see himself engaged in revolutionary action. He's in jail. One of the things that Russell Shoatz does that's different from so many other Panthers and Black folks who were engaged in the Black liberation struggle at that time is he goes to jail and he escapes. Very, very, very few. It was always the goal. Like, yeah, we're going to get captured, but we're going to escape. There was that thought. But he does this. He does it one time, and then he will do it again. Can you talk about that escape, Sharon, which we just read the first time that he escapes, and he's on the run for 27, 28 days, and he is free. Can you talk about that? And then Russell, we talked earlier today, you guys talked about the impact, actually, that we don't see of your father's action on you as children. Can you share that as well? And either one of y'all can start.
Well, for me, it was, for me, it was definitely living like a dual life. On one hand, we had this revolutionary father. Of course, I was young, so I didn't understand fully, what that actually meant. I would see headlines of cop killer, and then we also had the family that was still tight in the revolutionary stance of, doing the right thing for those who are oppressed. So, on one hand, we were hearing that, but on the other hand, we were seeing in the news, and the media is very powerful when you're young, and people tend to believe everything that's on the news. And so, our neighborhood, although he escaped, we live right across the street from our house, so they cleared the school, and we didn't know what they were clearing the school for. And when we came out, it was all the feds and everybody was at our house, ransacking our house. And of course, Russ tells the story about his friends, and I'm sure he'll tell it. But for me, I never felt any bullying or anything like that from the neighborhood. Like my father said, it was a middle class stronghold. What I did feel a lot was the single family household, because everyone around us was basically in a 2-parent household. And we weren't, So from that perspective, I always, wanted to have that 2-parent household as well, and seeing your father behind bars since you're 7 or 8, until you're grown and past that. I think I spent my entire adult life trying to get him free. So growing up, it was, the life of 2 different sides of a coin, and I was confused, embarrassed, sometimes, of course, angry, and all the emotions that comes with not having your father. And as a daughter, you look to, have your father. So from that perspective, it was good that, his side of the family nourished us, and kept us going. My grandmother's mother in particular was always there for us. But it's nothing like having your parents, your 2 parents in the home. So.
Yeah, all that you said, and I would add that what she's saying, in my experience, was, and it wasn't like a bully thing, but it definitely was a fascination thing, and it definitely was, because it was fundamental years, it was like 6th grade and below, and these things were happening in that while you're in elementary school. And so that would happen, and you would get out early from school, and anything getting out early from school demanded a replay, kind of sort of. And so people would be like, can you tell your dad to break out of prison again? So we can get that free day out, so that was, and it was a thing, it was like, when's that gonna happen again? Because we need that, because, that was good, And not because of anything political or anything, but because we get out of school early, I'm gonna come and talk to you about that on a regular, because I want that to happen again. Forget all of the other stuff. We don't get out like that all of the time, so we want that. But I think also getting older faster, being in the streets of Philadelphia, being into street culture, and being unpoliticized rushed me to, or brought me fast to, who my father was, because I didn't really know. But, slanging on the corner with everybody else, and we all get caught, and then they'd be like, who you? And I say Russell Shoatz, and be like, boop, boop, bop, 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 and I'd be like, why y'all ain't get, what about Fats? Fats do everything. What about my other homie? He's doing, y'all caught him with X-ray, he got a hammer. Why are y'all so focused on me? So I quickly recognized, I said, oh, okay. And I opened up to a relationship that there were points when I was younger, my dad would write me and I would just ball it up and shoot it in the best music letters is like, because I just, and there also came a point where I was politicized and we were mad cool, and I would always, and we all would always ask, and this is something that's just organic to children and parents or whatever, you just happen to be incarcerated. And so you're incarcerated, and I watched as my sisters and brothers came through to interact with my dad the same way, and we all did the same thing. Like, we don't know you, so who are you? And we want to know who you. We want to know who shot the cop. We want to know how you broke out. We want to know what happened, why you wasn't there for us, and we want to know. And so I had initially came there with that, and I was super young, and I thought I was super viral, and I thought I was super strong, but I was super emotionally hurt to learn from my mother that he was abusive to her. And I came there to fight, and I came there to protect my mother, and I came there to say, you're not my father. And I was disarmed by him, and I have this knowledge, this wisdom as a parent now from him, and he's passed on, that when I said that to him, and I was ready to fight in the visiting room, in the prison, and I was all of that, ready for everything, and I probably got beat up, but I was ready. But he took all of the winnings out of my cell by owning all of it. And that's one of my dad's real superpowers and real mystiques. And people who really know him, and even in the writings, you'll see that he is really good at just owning it. Whatever it is, owning it. Just being like, oh, I did that? Oh, okay. I'm going to own that I did that, and now moving forward, I'm going to try to do X, Y, and Z. How good I'm going to be at it, but I'm going to clearly say it to you that, yes, I fumbled the ball right there. I won't fumble it again, but I'm moving forward this way and trying to be better at it.
So, in addition to or keeping the conversation moving, I need to get some perspective too, because many of the people in this room, like we're talking about jailbreak, we're talking about maroonage, but many of the people in the room weren't born when we're talking about. This is like 1977. One of the things I would ask you to try to understand is that there were a lot of people going to jail. A lot of people going to jail all over the country. And what exists now as a political prisoner movement really is around, I don't want to diminish this, but around a few Panthers, a few political prisoners, when at the time, like, this was a movement that had hundreds of people in jail. When this brother escaped from jail in 1977, literally everyone in any form, I would dare say, was probably watched around the world. Liberation movements and people struggling around the world, because every day that he stayed free was a victory. He was not only king every day, he was our king every day. He was our visible flag of resistance every day. And I think I can safely say that for any of the conscious movements that had people in jail. We were rooting for this brother, really, really rooting for this brother to be gone. I mentioned today, it was like, I don't know how many people in this room remember when Angela Davis was on the run. I know Holly does. Holly was fascinated with Angela Davis, okay? He wasn't on me.
He wasn't by himself.
He wasn't by himself. But when Angela Davis was on the run, people, and I mean, you would talk to people, and this was a real conversation. People were hoping that she would show up at their door. And people kind of believed that she would, and they were ready to help her. And that's the way people felt about this brother the first time. And then the brother escapes a second time. Who does that? I mean, really, really, who does that with some degree of political consciousness? And again, for context, remember, this brother's in Western Pennsylvania, up in the mountains, where Black people stand out very, very, very easily. He had to use every resource that he knew, and every resource, and he gained some resources, he gained some training to be able to evade these folks. And he did a damn good job of it. They had the state police, the local police, highway patrol, FBI, everybody looking for this, as well as local people, just people looking for this brother. And to be gone for close to a month, that was an accomplishment. And we loved your father for that. Your father is still loved for that. By those of us who remember, this book certainly will help with that memory. You guys, let's talk about the book a bit. You guys worked with the sister Kanya to bring this book together. You want to talk about, well, first of all, let's talk about the origin of it, because much of this was done by your father in the first place. You did some editing. How did you help your father's narrative? Because trust me, this book reads like a work of fiction. Okay, it reads like somebody created this Superman character to just evade the law. It reads so fluidly and so well. How did you guys bring this together?
Well, initially, I had moved to New York in 1990, and I started running into Panthers and BLA members, and they actually knew my father on the streets. So I leaned into those stories because, of course, I only knew him from behind bars. So I didn't know anything about him, and they would come up with stories like, "Oh, he was still the best cars." I mean, we was riding in luxury, and I'm looking like, okay, you know. And so I would go back to him in a, letter and say, like, this guy came up to me, and it happened to be Ali Bey Hassan for the New York 21. And, he was telling me, and I'm like, okay. And, I began to write my father, and I kind of pressured him to begin to tell me who he was. And at this time, I was in my early 20s, and there was a tribunal going on in New York for political prisoners and the human rights abuses. And he wanted me to get his dossier there, and I didn't know New York well because I had just moved there. And so I missed out, and then I met Safia Bukhari, and she said, "I'll help you with your father, but you have to go to the Deruba Ben Wahad trial." And I was like, "No, I'm going to work." And she was like, "No, you're going to be at that trial." And sure enough, it was on the heels of, Nelson Mandela being freed, and then Deruba was freed. And so I was like, okay, we can free our political prisoners. We started me on the journey of, really finding out who my father was. And we began to write back and forth until we had this family document. And then the 22 years of solitary confinement, Fred Ho convinced him to use the document. And that's when we brought Kanya in. And what you have now is the final I Am Maroon publication. So that was really the origin of me just incessantly questioning him and us writing back and forth, and me meeting like some 20th century revolutionaries, some Panthers and some BLA members who were still alive and on the street, and we're still fighting on behalf of political prisoners and Panthers and BLA members in prison.
BLA, Black Liberation Army.
BLA. The acronym, I'm sorry that I used it and didn't say Black Liberation Army. And BUCK is the Black Unity Council, which is the organization that my father and my aunts and community folks started in Philadelphia.
So we talked about how the book's origin got started.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that and quickly say that I love what, well, I honestly, I can't say I love what Kanye did with the book, but I because I haven't read it all yet. But this comes from a document that we had for some 20 years now, or what have you. And I'm so enthralled with that document, which on a lot of levels can't be produced and never was meant to be produced. It was a family document. Him just saying, okay, y'all want to know this is who I am, this is what happened. But that document is so much rawer than this document. And so I'm going to turn a little bit in this moment, reverse journalist on you. And I know this document is good. I know my dad, and it still has a certain level of his voice just because of his meticulousness. It would be hard for you to try to, now you could easily write out people's names and change their names so they won't be criminalized and nobody get locked up or anything like that. But how does that, and I thought it would, I don't know, whatever you're reading, but you were saying that, I don't know what the terminology you used, but you said something about the Philly gang stuff. What you said, it did what to you? It what? It landed, it what? You didn't say landed, you said it.
No, I think
You said he nailed it. You said he nailed it, right? But what does that mean? What does nailed it mean from a Philly guy from back then, blah, blah, blah. And so also the question after that is, because you're a Philly guy and he nailed it and you know all of those references and the gangs in the streets and the hoops and all of that, will that land the same on someone who is not as well steeped as you in that culture of Philly gangs? Because I know he is still a vibrant, vivid writer, but you said he nailed it, and I know what that means for you. But what would that mean for someone else?
I'm going to respond to that. I'm also going to say, Greg, I know you're reading the book. Have you finished at this point? And you certainly have done the part of the game. So I'll ask you to help me.
Yeah, anybody
with your thoughts on it as well. So when I said your father nailed it, I've done some writing as well. And the Philly,
Oh, get out of here.
no, just a little. The Philly gang part, I was not immersed in it like your father was. The gangs affected me. Okay, I was on the affect side of it, as well as on the effect side, but more on the affect side. The gangs that your father was talking about and the hierarchy, this is what I'm explaining. He's explaining something that doesn't exist in the same way now. And it's like he's a cultural historian. He's an archaeologist. He's a cultural archaeologist in the sense that he's painting a culture, and he's painting levels and hierarchies in that culture, and he's using the names of all of these places that I grew up knowing. So he's very authentic in what he's saying. This is what I mean when I say he nailed it. Right. He like some of the gangs that he's talking about. Like you would hear the gangs and you go hide. Okay, I mean like you don't even want to see the people. You'd be going down the street looking over your shoulder, trying to avoid these people that you never would see. Like when he talks about the moon, he's talking about the moon. You know what I mean? And that was a fearsome gang. He talks about bringing together 500. At one point, with 500 people, they used to really have badass gang wars in Philly. I mean, and what the other part that he gets in this book, like when I say he nails it, you're talking about a time before guns. You see, people, I mean, the most that the gangs had in those days was zip guns. Right. You like put a 20, you put rubber bands around a car antenna, you put a 22 in there, you put a nail in there, you file it off, and you'd have a zip gun and you'd be bad, but you couldn't really use it, because if you miss or explode on you, somebody will whip your butt. So you didn't really use it. He's talking about a time of honor among gangs where you call a fair one. And what a fair one was, like you just pick the baddest person in the room and you say fair one, and you fight that person. If you win, you get to walk out of here. If you don't win, you know, you don't win. You don't win, but you're gonna get stopped by everybody else too. You know, it's gonna be one of them things. But that's what I meant by nailing it. We have the fortune to have, and before I do that, I was gonna ask Greg to comment, but we also have your sister here as well, Tammy. That's Tammy, right? So we have another one of Russell's daughters here, children here. Tammy, can you just stand up and wave at folks, please? I know you didn't come here for this, but you got it, okay? Greg, can you help us on that point? What did you see in the book? What did you think? Particularly with Philly, given your tenure in Philly and your still connection with Philly, you know a lot about it. What did you see?
I love Philadelphia.
Wait.
Say Holly, I told you I was coming up here. I told you.
I was going to try
Oh,
to
you help it out, okay.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to be very brief because this book has me it had me and will have me engrossed. Because as a teacher, I don't know, Prof, you might weigh in on this as well. We have students, maybe about close to 20 years ago, we had students in Philadelphia read We Want Freedom, Mumia's book. And at the time, Reggie Shell was alive, Captain Reggie. And so a bunch of 14, 15, 16-year-old Philadelphians in North Philly with the books in their hand walked past Captain Reggie sitting on the stoop with his son. He said, "What are y'all reading?" That led to him coming. Barbara came. It was a bunch of Philly Panthers came with these young people. It's about 200 young people. I'm only saying as a backdrop to this. I wish we had this book. So when I see Sharif El-Mekki, I'm going to ask Sharif, this is the book we need to read next summer. Because for Philadelphia, and Paul, you're very gracious, brother. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, but I love Philadelphia. I lived there almost 20 years. I still back and forth. And the stories here, I don't even say stories. Like you said, read cinematic. And I guess maybe later on I'm talking about how, I guess initially there was some talk about making it a screenplay and cinematic. It does read like this couldn't have happened to somebody. But as the point is made in here, as he talks about being in war, I guess this is maybe in the afterward. And war isn't about an individual. This is a story of a people. And it's a story of an intellectual in the true sense. And so, and I'll just end with this initially because you asked a very specific question, but thank you, brother, for asking. When I read this, having not experienced it, I'm 59, but having lived in Philadelphia with all those old heads who lived this period, it's like I'm listening to another one of them. I was at Temple, one of the brothers who worked there, always talking about the Moroccos. I mean, reading this, it puts flesh on all those stories of all those elders. You know, Max Stanford taught at Temple for a long time. I was at Hakeem's on 52nd Street and came across his master's thesis on RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement.
That thing is for real.
Brother. And then I said, well, where is Max Stanford? I called Robin Kelly, who was the time at NYU. I said, where's Max Stanford? I said, I think Max is somewhere in Cleveland talking. So I went to the chair of the State Department and said, man, we need this dude here. So they recruited him. He came back to Philadelphia and he started teaching at Temple. And just sitting listening to Max, this is what this is, the Black Guards. If I had a penny for every time I heard Tony Montero talk about the Black Guards, this takes it from them to somebody who not only defied this funky system, but triumphed over it. He was freer in prison than I am in many ways right now. Not that I want to be physically incarcerated, but in terms of what he did around study, this is a model for how we should be doing intellectual work. And so I just want to thank you for seeing this project through and this gift to us, because now we have something that will allow this next generation, particularly young Philadelphians, to just immerse themselves in this. So that's all. Thank you. I'm getting
Thank you, Greg, thank you so much. And you're not going anywhere,
No,
right?
I'm sitting right now. No, no. I leave my calendar.
We're gonna open up for questions, but I wanna ask first, is there anything that you would like to read? Is there a voice that you would like to give, a passage that you would like to give voice to?
To be honest, I had to read it so many times during the editing, and it was so emotional. You know, it like drained me, and it took a lot out of me every time because, you know, the story of your parents, you know, and then, as you said, he nailed it with the gangs. He nailed it with the middle class stronghold in West Philly. I mean, he named all the neighborhoods. Like, if you're from Philly, oh my God, it's like he nailed it. So from those perspectives, you know, it brought me joy, but other parts brought me, like, you know, it took me down and then it brought me up. You know, it's a roller coaster of emotions with this book, and particularly for me, and the editing was crazy. So I'm going to pass on reading anything, but what I will say is that it is a great read. You know, it's a powerful read. My father never relented from freedom. He never relented from thoughts of freedom. I know I sat with him in, you know, the prison room, and he would tell me, look at the air duct. Yeah, he would tell me that. You know, like, those are things when I look in the room, I look up at everything to see how I could possibly get to freedom. So he never relented from that, and he never relented from his commitment to the struggle for liberation for all oppressed people. Because if you read the book, he talks about all the study groups he did from people globally that are oppressed around the world. So his commitment was not just here, he saw it from a global perspective as well. So for me, I'm going to pass on reading anything, but that's how I felt about when I was reading it during the editing process.
Yeah, there's a couple passages that I'll allude to. I won't read from them or what have you. I know the book inside out, upside down, and you can re-edit it, you can put flowery terms on it, you can decriminalize people in it. But, you know, the core of it to me kind of sort of is this document that is meant for family. And my father has a certain type of voice when he's writing too. So we all have a ton of letters, at least me and my sister Sharon have a ton of letters that we could produce books for days on. But I say all of that to say that my dad has a kind of indelible spirit. He is an archetype. He is a warrior archetype. And he had this never say die type of attitude, and it just carried over into different areas of activity. If it was study, then it was going to be going hard at the study. If it was working out, it was going to be going hard at the working out. If it was trying to liberate himself, it was going to be going extra hard at, you know, that and whatever those things were. And even in his passing, I saw that in him, just a fervor in the end. And I say to people, these are old studies of my dad. You know, my dad did so much after writing this and had so many other different ideological revelations and was into things like computers in prison and this MOOCs program and just a whole bunch of stuff, you know. But one of the things also that I want to say is that there are a lot of unsung and uncommon heroes, and in this story also, Sister Phyllis, who, you know, smuggled long arms and short weapons into facility and ended up doing 7 years. You know, nobody respects the sister, not respects her, I won't say people disrespect her. But her name is just as important as my father's name. Obviously, she's a woman that brings weapons into a facility. I don't know y'all doing that. I ain't doing that. So her name should be celebrated. Unsung people like JoJo. People know JoJo now, but there were, and people don't know JoJo, but JoJo Bolden is a person who killed a warden in Pennsylvania and was and still recognizes himself. And this is something about my father. My father was very military minded, and in the prison, like JoJo calls him a warlord. Like we got all this flowery stuff and all Maroon and that. JoJo's like, no, your dad is a warlord. And I'm like his chief of security. And so if he going through problems or whatever, and I'm the chief of security, and your Uncle Saeed is our imam, and they feeding on pork sandwiches, and I tell them to stop, and they don't stop, then I gotta have a meeting with their security, and I gotta whack them. That's JoJo, and that was years ago. And he's standing on that now to today. That's JoJo. And he like, I'll whack whoever. That's me. I'm a whacking machine. I whack for liberation. So when the system, when the state, when the warden is doing things like, creating gladiator sport or opening up, doors on certain, and two Aryan brothers get to come out and just be you, and everybody else behind there trying to slide stuff to you or rooting in the cage or whatever it may be. JoJo's like, yeah, I'm I want that. That's my smoke. That's my area. That's my, and that's what I'm here for. And I'm not trying to duck that, dodge that, get around that, get out of jail. One of the things with JoJo is don't start no campaigns around me. I don't want none of that. Don't do none of that for me because I'm not about that. That's not, me and your dad was never about that. Your dad got the campaign and all that. Y'all was good kids and all, but he wasn't really about that, and I ain't about that. We came and did what we do, and we're gonna come and do that again whenever we gotta do it or whatever. That's what we do. This is who we are. We're soldiers in the war of liberation for humanity, and this is what we do.
So Russell, I was thinking about how you were saying how your dad was all in. He just go all out, whatever he was doing. And one of the things I was thinking when you said that, how that trait of his must have carried over into the family. Because y'all went out all out in terms of support for him. Literally at any political prisoner event, you could expect to see a team showing up, a family for your dad. And I want to acknowledge you guys on that. I want to thank you for loving your father enough to do that, even if you had disputes with him. Caring for him, because that your sister Teresa has talked about this, how she stayed on the prison administration and how instrumental that was to your father coming home in his last days. I want to talk about that, and then we'll go into a question and answer. But the lesson really is for anyone that has people incarcerated. You got to support them. You got to support them, because if you don't, they become unknown. Teresa talks about how particularly persistent support helped bring your father home. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about his transition, his last days? Because he did come home. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of things, a couple of things really come to my mind. And one is, and I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to be saying it, publicly, is it that, especially with our PPs, and this goes back, and we know that there are these hierarchies in our movements, and there's a hierarchy in the political prisoner movement. And my father was in that hierarchy. But prior to a lot of that work and what it looked like and us coming together as a family and pushing and pushing and pushing is what it looks like in the world and a lot of other spaces is people jockeying for position. Families of political prisoners jockeying to try to wave the flag, get some limelight, get some liberation for their whoever it is. And so in that space, like a space that is driven by capitalism, there's this competition, there's this drive, there's this, and so even outside of that, like you're saying, our family is just kind of driven, like that. We come from an education family, and those people go crazy on education. They just go crazy on education. Elmeki is my cousin, so that's the example. They just go bonkers in that way, and that's great. But at the end of the day, part of this underbelly of the work that is done around political prisoners, and I want to say this, is there's a lot of exploitation. There's a ton of exploitation. You just look at a person like Mumia, how long he's been incarcerated, all of the energy, time, people, effort, money that has went into his case for him to be sitting in anywhere right now. I'm talking about energy. I'm talking about big energy. I'm talking about rock band energy. I'm talking about stadium energy. Okay? And so, the lawyers, us, the families, people are extracted and exploitive of these people, including us. Okay? But that needs to be held up front. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be accountable. It needs to be called out. The gig is up on using our freedom fighters and our political prisoners for you to come up off of, for you to make movies, for you to make books, that's a wrap. That's a wrap. And especially colonizers. That's a wrap. And so in this context of, my father coming home, I had personally been saying to folks, do anything, throw anything up against the wall to try to liberate my dad. And I say that, and I'll wrap up here. For our political prisoners, aging political prisoners, waiting and begging the state to release them because they are sick is not a legal strategy. Hear me again. So you don't be confused and don't be on any bandwagon talking about you trying to help somebody get medical release. That is not a legal strategy. If they have lawyers, tell them to do something else. The family can work on a medical release. Suing the state, that's a legal strategy. Just to be clear, anybody in this room waiting for somebody to almost be dead to go to the state and say to them, can we get them now, please? It's not work. It's not movement work. It ain't none of that. That's none of that. From a family member of somebody who went through that.
Yeah, I think for us, for the family, we have lived various different strategies of trying to get Maroon home. And yeah, we don't want to see our political prisoners coming home half dead. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But on the other hand, it was, bittersweet because my dad was home around family. He could have died there with no one around him or family, but we know the hospice there, it would have been, someone incarcerated. But I think that the struggle that we went through to even get him home was, as Paul said, my sister was relentless on the medical. I mean, she had the terminology down pat. She called them every day. They had to give her a progress report. So to the point where she had a relationship with these people, and they end up saying, we're starving them to death. And can't say that on the phone, but this is what's happening, you know. So I think that relationship building is important, although it may not feel important. But without that, we wouldn't have known he was starving, you know. We wouldn't have known that because they would have never shared that, you know. And so, as my brother said, you gotta throw it all at the wall because you just don't know what's gonna stick. Right? But we can't wait until our political prisoners are dying and dead to get them home. We can't have organizations like Black Lives Matter standing on the backs of political prisoners and not have that as part of their agenda.
I'm just gonna jump in real quick on that. Just really quick.
Is one of the problems I also had with the whole uprising and the COVID situation was I felt like, and I could be wrong, people in the audience tell me, but I felt like that was an opportunity for negotiation, and there was a lot of negotiation happening. We got a lot of things, painted streets, we got all kinds of things, holidays, we got things out of the deal. We got monies, we got things. Political education wise, whenever you get the state to a point where they're negotiating, which is not almost ever, in my years, I never saw the state at the point the state was at this last uprising. I never saw it in my life. Maybe someone can give me and politically educate me. And at that most excellent moment, you know what people who I worked in movement with for 20 years were asking for? Not my father. Stuff like, let's take the money from the police. Let's defund them. So I just look at all them people and say, ideologically, politically, education-wise, you haven't studied well. All you got to do is look at the Irish, see what they did with their people. All you got to do is look at the Iranians or the Palestinians or whoever you want to look at. And when they get the opportunity to negotiate, the first thing they say is, oh, well, give us our prisoners, and then we're going to go from there. But they don't say nothing about no stupid cops. About, oh, we're going to try to restructure and counter your system by internally taking finance away from you, just ideologically. In a political education sense, show me where they did that at historically so we can use that as a way of moving forward to disarm the state.
So we're going to open it up, but I'm curious. Well, I'm going to ask you. You can shake your head. I'm going to ask you. Would you like to contribute anything to the conversation? Are there impressions, memories of your father that you would share with us? Okay, fine. That's a no on that one. We're opening up for questions. And how is our time? We good? Okay.
I want
You want to? Okay.
I want to get some context to this. I got locked up in 72. In 1970, they started rounding up all young people. This Citizen Project, I think, called 50 Years in Wake Up. That's when they started identifying No Knock, Nixon. All right. At the height in the 70s, on the heels of the party, which was like a fighting formation, that's when you had an influx of political prisoners. A lot of Panthers was getting locked up, PLA, Kenyatta, a lot of groups was getting locked up. So they came into the prison system. From the 70s all the way up to the 80s, we had a situation where we was at war. That's why when they killed William Knowlton, and Soledad, and George said, they talk about fasting. Now we ain't fasting, we retaliate. So to your point, right? we moved to bring, meal, we moved to bring the problem of political prisoners to the United Nations. You talk about that. We organized around it. All prisons organized around it. The contradiction is this. It don't matter. COINTELPRO, they put people in position. Pautier, I don't care what you say or what we do. Oh, we didn't go break him out. Pautier,
Say that one again?
we didn't go break him out. Pautier is going down death of 1,000 cuts. Is it your father? Is it Eddie Conway? A death of 1,000 cuts. I got out. I did 48 years. We got out on the case. If they wouldn't have got me out on the case, they would be a body bag to myself. Cause I was up in Cumberland. That's where I was gonna be at. Cause I try to escape. Got the World Book of Guinness for trying to most failed attempts to escape. So to your point, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, right? But the problem is this. The problem is that until we dismantle this system, we always gonna have this situation where they're gonna call out groups like Black Lives Matter and commercialize them. We always gonna have a situation where Occupy Wall Street, these numbers and, like divest. We always gonna have these things because they're gonna always go out as we have what we got now. But to your father, and like the brother was saying right here, this is a manuscript on what this struggle look like up front in person. So I appreciate y'all for that.
Thank you.
I was listening to, sorry, my name is Nkoji. I was listening to your conversation about the political education piece, and just personally, like I grew up in DC, the most radical, I would say like radical education I had was at Howard University Middle School, when, I had Mr. and Billy Shaka as one of my teachers and all these different things. But where do you think that we're, as African people in America, are getting the political education that we need in this new generation of I grew up in the 2000s, because I don't really see it. I think there's pockets of it, but it's not mainstream. And I feel like we're media attacks the political education that we could be getting in our community. So I'm just curious as to what do you think the solution is to get the political education to know how to negotiate and what to ask for? Because I see that as an issue not only in America, but in the African diaspora.
Oh, that's an excellent question. What's your name again?
Nkosi.
Nkosi, thank you for that excellent question. It's multi-layered, and I agree that the continent, the young people on the continent are asking that very specific question. And I like to use our historical struggles to answer these questions. I don't want to go and get creative or none of that. And there's no getting around study. There's no getting around studying yourself, your culture, your history, the things that the people did before you in order to try to get liberation, where they failed, where they succeeded, so forth and so on. That is the way to me. I think structurally wise, I think the internet is a huge tool. I don't think it's the best or the, beat them all type of situation, but it's a great tool along with YouTube and audio and visual. I learned very well audio and visual that way, and I have learned a tremendous amount more that way. So that's what I would propose to your question. As far as institutions, Brother Shep from the Black Panthers in New York and MXG and different folks that all have political education courses. If you're really interested in looking for that in a Zoom or open face-to-face type of manner. But again, by an organization or on your own, it is our duty as a people to know and understand, our African civics, our African historical politics and understanding, even our spirituality. It's our job to know our African esoteric sciences. It's our job. We shouldn't be confused when we see white folks doing, European rituals. We shouldn't be shocked at the Illuminati and we shouldn't be shocked at all. We should say, oh, those are Europeans doing African esoteric sciences. What you scared of? Why are you scared of the devil and all that? Why are you scared? They just took your stuff and flipped it back on you. That's what they always, they taking gambling and flip it back on you. They taking weed and flip it back on you. They take it and everything, flip it back on you. They take Jack Daniels, flip it back on you. It's your stuff. And they flip it all back on you. Now you're looking and you're confused. Learn yourself. Learn who you are. This store right here. This is an institution you in right here. Come to the institution and learn. You know, and we not doing that.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sandra Jarvis Barber. I am a historian, a Howard, and I teach, I chair at UTC, and I'm teaching this semester, of course, history of Black women. And this is amazing. I'm from Atlantic City, New Jersey. So I know Rizzo. My older brother is Khalid Shabazz. He's vice president of city council, and he's a councilman. He was at Cheney. And I remember Rizzo telling my brother if he ever saw him again, he would not leave Pennsylvania alive. So I have a history with this. But as a historian and an admirer of Dr. Carr and Mr. Coates, I'm sitting here thinking of a course we have just brought over from the university to the college, and that's a fight I'll tell you about. That's a brown liquor and dinner story. So at the community, I'm at the community college. I am going to use our, we have a course that's independent topics, and use that for political, I'm gonna think of a sexy title, so my dean will support it, to look at political prisoners, to look at these episodes, these individuals, the name of the sister that you called, that brought in the weapons that no one knows, that name, that history should be told. Those are and when you ask the sister asks, how are you going to learn it? Some of it's going to be on your own because you are going to be intelligent enough, and I'd love to meet the sister as well. You can just tell her. She's going to go into it, but for others, it's going to be those of us who teach, those of us who educate, those of us who want that history to be known, to first educate ourselves about this and then to teach it. I love what you said about the internet. The internet is not always bad if you use it right. One of the things we do is open educational resources. We don't use textbooks. I have my faculty go out and get contemporary, current materials to use. So our students don't buy textbooks in my division, right? And that helps because, you know, young people now, they want something that relates to them. So the most robust department we have is law enforcement in our community college, right? And we're going to be doing a majors meeting in April, and all of what I'm getting to is I'd love to stay in touch. I would love to have you come and talk to our students and to talk about this, setting the stage for when I bring in this course that I'm going to be doing Black ideologies. Because our students need to know this. They want to know this history.
I think they do.
And it's just important. Last thought, my dean told me I have some money in the budget and I have to use it. So I'm going to have this book purchased, have it in our library and have it purchased for our students. Because if we don't shepherd this and usher it in, you know, by the time you're trying to get in, get your hours, get your credit hours, get the English, get this, sometimes this gets lost and it's not rising up to the top where it should be. So our students get out and they're mad. They're like, Doc, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know. Right? So now it's on us. So, and you may hear from me to come in and talk to some faculty. Because if they don't know about it, they can't teach it, even if they want to. And fortunately, we're not in Texas, we're not in Florida, no one's telling us what history to teach. So we have the opportunity to do that. Last point, sometimes we just have to get together and do some Zooms do some,
That's
utilize Sankofa, ask highly if we can just come in, bring our students, and have these conversations and teach here. As a public historian, I believe in history learned outside of the classroom anyway. So my faculty don't stay 15 weeks anywhere. You gotta get these students out into the community. And this would be a perfect opportunity to come here, have these conversations, so they can learn this. So I thank you for this, and I'll tell Colleen that, I mentioned.
Oh, thank you so much. And small world, and I want to exchange.
Thank you for this talk. My name is Jeanette Lenoir, and
I didn't hear you. What is your name?
Jeanette Lenoir.
Okay.
I'm a journalist, and I saw, Sankofa comes through my email sometimes, and sometimes I'll show up and take part. But what brought me here was the word Maroon, because I am a Maroon. I'm from Suriname.
Oh, wow.
I'm from I grew up being called a Maroon. These are my mother's eyes that you see my shirt says, I am not your Maroon. I'm always triggered by the word Maroon because of what it means. It derives from the word Cimarron, which when the Spaniards conquered the region I come from in northern South America, when their animals would run away, they called them Cimarrons. Later, during the slave trade, when they brought enslaved Africans there, the British named enslaved people Maroon. So the word derives from Cimarron to Maroons. And so I'm highly offended by that word because we know who we are. We do not call ourselves Maroon. So I thought it was very interesting that in America, a lot of the African American culture, they romanticize the word Maroon, which is fine. But as an actual person who's called a Maroon, we reject it because we do not call ourselves that. I'm a Pamaka person. In Suriname, my country, there are 5 other tribes that are there. There's Samaka, Matawai, Aluku, Unjuka, and I'm Pamaka. We speak different dialects. I speak my tribal language. But in academia and all over the world, people still refer to us as Maroons. But the word means runaway slave. And when I say I am not your Maroon, I'm saying I'm not your runaway slave, because I'm nobody's slave. I'm a freeman, and we've always been free. And that is what truly the word means, is a freeman, not your runaway slave. And so I rejected, but I came here and listened because I realized that what your father was doing was searching for freedom. He truly was the Maroon. He truly was fighting for what he knows is inherently his, which is God-given freedom, and I applaud that. But language is important. And I think it's very important that to know thyself is to reject the labeling that those that have oppressed us have given us. And that's part of the education. And so when I say I'm not your Maroon, I say I'm not your slave. The enslaver is the actual slave because they need us to feel important,
You do, I'm certain you would agree that what you're defining as terminology in your experience is not terminology for all people.
Yeah, there's so many proud Maroons like in
other words,
Jamaica.
enslaved Africans who escaped where you came from would have a particular view of the world and a particular view of identifying themselves. It is not necessarily how other people would define themselves, though.
Yes, I know that, and that's what I noted. But I'm actually I was born in Suriname. I was raised on a Maroon village. I'm from Langatabacha. My grandfather was chief of our islands. We're Pamaka people. And so I was born a so-called Maroon. And so we know what that word means, but we reject it, or we've always stood against it. But what we do embrace is our freedom and the fight for freedom. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate that your father never let that spirit die, because that's exactly what that means. That we are tribal Africans, not Maroons.
Thank you.
I would like to add to that,
So, two things. One, my father was coming back to the prison, kind of dejected because he had just been caught and is being returned, and knowing that there are a lot of prisoners and people just rooting for him not to be caught. So he's coming back, he's caught, and he's kind of a little dejected or what have you. And someone says to him, they were chasing you like a Maroon. And he was like, well, what is that? He had no understanding of what that was. And then went on a historical journey, just doing the history of Maroons. And one of the things with my father too was they had these, for lack of better terms, study courses in solitary confinement. So if you ended up in solitary confinement, you ended up forced taking these courses that my dad, would put out. And if you didn't take them, then, when the gates open, it'd be whatever. But also in those studies, my sister Sharon, me, my sister Teresa, whoever would come, my dad would make you not just purchase his library. You wouldn't just have to buy books for him, but then you had to study them with him, and then he would quiz you and on the books that you had to buy for him. And one of the subjects, obviously Maroons, I've studied in an insane way, and know that it was a global culture, and that also there were European slaves that they use this same term with. They use this term also in Brazil. They use this term in Palmares. They use this term globally. And one of the people who I would love to introduce to this audience, and some of you may know or may not know, but he is one of the greatest slave liberators or Maroon liberators or converters into runaways, is a person named Bartholomew Roberts, or Black Bart. And so Black Bart was the king of the Golden Age pirates. And you try to look him up, I tell you, go and do the research. It's there to be found if you really want to look for it. But basically, he was a navigator, an African navigator on a ship that got mutinied, and they killed the captain and made this guy the captain. He went around, for lack of better terms, attacking the British and Portuguese slave ships and taking the slaves off of the ship, putting them on his ship, and then going around and finding the next ship to rob and plunder. But you must understand, in this research, in this study, in this Black Bart being the greatest pirate of all times, and how they steal your stuff. When you watching Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp with dreads, just trying to figure out who that is. And why they spending all this money, time, and effort telling you a story about a white boy with dreads. And why you ain't even ask yourself, why the white boy got dreads? And why is piracy, and we talking about democratic and social economies and economic, why is piracy not studied? Why do you not support your brothers in Somalia when they come across that water and they make a movie, oh, the Somalians, blah, blah. Why you not politically educated to know and support and to spin the story back the way it's supposed to be? Because the water, maritime law, is all free. You get out there, it's whatever out there. That's why piracy is what it is. When you get out there, it's whatever. Anything, I could bury you, and then it's whatever. Whatever happened out here stays out here in the sea. And if I throw you over here right now, that's it. That's the law. That is the law. That is the law. And so you talk about 10-point programs. Black Bar had the first 10-point program. You talk about the Western Duel and all that stuff. That comes from a black person, Black Bar. You can't sit on this shit. You can't drink on this shit. I got an African orchestra on this shit that plays us into battle with djembes. And that's why one ship is able to take over 27 ships. Look it up. Why don't they tell you about this? Why don't we know? Why is he celebrated? Why isn't Black Bart celebrated? Why don't we know that one of the richest men outside of Mansa Musa is Black Bart, a slave liberator? All right, I'm going
on. We're gonna wrap down, wind down. Just want to make sure there are any other questions. Well, we can go back.
Yeah, let's talk.
All right,
Hello.
I'm done. Y'all get it.
No, it's just good. My name is Tracy Wyatt. Hi. So, I mean, this was very intriguing. I was born and raised here in Washington, D.C. I was born in 1972. D.C. to me back then was just so black. You know, the only white people I would see is the insurance man who would come around occasionally. And when my mom took me to a job at the post office in Silver Spring, her co-workers, okay? That was the only time I really saw white people. Matter of fact, it wasn't until I worked at the Department of Justice that I experienced racism. And that was when I was in high school in the co-op program. But nonetheless, I was able to relate to so many of the things that you were saying, from, you know, the neighborhood stuff with the kids and how, you know, doing anything to get a day out of school. What? They were at your pizza house. Get out here. Can they come back again? Is that going to get us out of school again? You know, so those little funny things as kids is just so typical of us in our communities. But then when you spoke about the single family home and what that was like in the struggle, when you're talking about domestic abuse and what that's like and how you try to grapple with those things. But after studying Steve Biko and other revolutionaries, both males and females, it's fascinating on one end, right? Because you're seeing all these heroic things and we like, yeah, you know, we're rooting them on and we want them to win. We want to see them because it's like, yeah, they're getting over on the system. They getting, you know, they're being liberated. They're helping to liberate us. But then you see that other side, that personal side, that lived experience, the struggles that they have as a person, them dealing with the mental, the emotional, and spiritual of being incarcerated, overcoming their own personal demons, trying to be this better person, you know, admitting when they're wrong and saying, okay, I've been here, I know I'm wrong, I messed up. How can I move forward with this? We can't change yesterday, but we can change tomorrow, today and tomorrow. So all of those things, I was just like, oh, I was feeling all of it. I was like kind of like moving in my seat. It felt like I was in a movie. And the ups and downs that you were talking about on this, I was like, oh my God, oh, this stuff is good. It gets juicy, right? Because it feels like Asada Shakur's book, you know? And I'm like, yeah, it's got to be up and down, and that's how I felt here, you know, experiencing all that. So I want to thank you, one, for being so real and raw, sharing your story, that which is beyond the book, those letters that you have from your dad, still honoring your dad, even though there were issues, but being able to connect to that side of him that was community and that people loved and that grew into something so great and so beautiful that became a symbol, a symbolism of freedom around the world is something amazing. Not everybody can point to that or point to him and say, that's my dad. But we can embrace him as part of our community and say, oh, that's our brother, and look at what he has done and the work he's done. So thank you for that. I'm very excited to be able to read the book and get into it. And like I said, it's juicy. And hearing about the gangs, I did want to bring that up. I mean, there were gangs everywhere here in D.C. Many of my family members were part of them. Many of them incarcerated. I can't say they were political prisoners, but they, you know, there may be some. And, you know, working on both sides of the fence in community, I think the last part I really wanted to focus on is, you know, when you said, when they kind of had the state in the chokehold, when, you know, everything was going on with George Floyd and, you know, during COVID and all these things. But, and you were saying, talking about throwing everything at the wall too, right? To see what would stick, what you can get. And I saw in that moment both and. You know, if this one group can get
reforming or what have you of the police department and the defund. Okay, great. If you can get the political prisoners out, that group can do that. Fine, go after that. Whatever everybody could go after, it's like everybody go after everything. Sometimes it's not just one thing, and that's what I loved about Steve Biko and studying him, because they they just took so many different roads to liberating people, and like you were saying here, mentally, that psychologically, you see things, same thing with Frank Fanon. They talk about that psychological liberation, and then it moves into the spiritual part as well, and liberating just all around, even to the Black aesthetics, right? To who we are, what we look like, and being liberated in that, understanding who God is and how God created us and loved us. So it's all those things. I was able to get all that from you all today in this conversation. So thank you for sharing, and I'm looking forward to reading about your dad, and thank you for sharing him with us. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm not sure I want to give her the mic.
I tried.
Well, we tried.
I want to close it now, but I want to say, maybe I want to take your time, my time, some of us time together and sandwich it. Could you bring that stuff? Just bring it in. Yes, I want to be handled right here. Okay, in terms of squabbling about Maroon, etc., let's look at how our folks call themselves in different parts of this struggle. There's no monopoly. It's not something we can bottle and sell. It's something different. And I want to apologize before I speak to my sister here, my brother there. For you guys, he is your father. For us, he is also a symbol of something. And that you have to separate. When we sandwich the two, Malcolm X's family is one thing, Malcolm X is another thing.
Yes.
When we mix this up, we end up making more mistakes, more disastrous, let's say, or backwardness backwardness, moving the struggle backward. In my view, when I was actually doing Sankofa, I studied more Suriname and Brazil than any country, but let me speak to this issue here. It's the prisoners who called them a Maroon. And you wonder why, even Maroon, as critically we can discuss it from the point of view my sister is coming from, which is discussable, not an absolute, but discussable for everybody, because we don't know the circumstances, because in Jamaica, there's Maroon Town, Maroon Cave, Maroon Hills, Maroonage, Stinger Finger. Yes, my sister. So, I'll get together with you because you might help me do better. But the issue what I'm trying to bring is Maroonage is an issue that Black people appropriated and gave it another meaning. That's what we have to know. Maroon is like Africa is not Africa. It's not African. It's a reference by Europeans who called Ethiopia Greek, black, burnt people, burnt faces. We call ourselves still Ethiopians. We call Africa, Africa. But it's not a name we made. But what we do is we take a name and then appropriate it to mean what we want it to mean. That is what I want to speak at. Because to me, I want to discuss Maroons, especially the film I'm making now. It's at the time I'm doing Sankofa, there was a news of your father escaping. And I paid attention to it, not when he first escaped, it's when prisoners called him Maroon. When in fact at Howard, where I was teaching 43 years, scholars didn't know what Maroon was even. And here prisoners knew what it was. In whatever we think that is, they knew more than scholars and teachers. And then, in fact, in Sankofa, the part I cut out because of the budget and because I couldn't afford it is the mountain, the hilltop, the hill people. Some people call them the hill people. from Freedom Mountain. And so for me, it was so connected. I was amazed how popular community knows this history and labeled him, "You're a Maroon." That's powerful
That is
for us who are like looking at this labeling coming out of our community, especially prisoners. When I showed my film in the federal prison in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, the prisoners there analyzed my film more than any scholar to this day has ever done. I'm sorry to say that. I went there, these are prisoners analyzing my film. Brilliant black men and women, black men actually, there were not women there except the organizers were women. They were analyzing my film and beyond teaching me. And I said to myself, how can I leave to go to Howard, leaving these prisoners behind, these brilliant black men behind prison? That's how I felt. And I'm telling you, I'm a frustrated filmmaker because black people, the elite black people, the black intelligentsia, do not know how to analyze culture. They're so politically narrow, chiseled, they don't know how to talk about the cultural implication of analyzing a black cinema. The other day, somebody was talking about he's supposed to be a scholar, and his favorite film is Green Mile. And Green Mile basically is about a black man who goes around trying to cure white people, and they electrocuted his ass in the And I'm saying to myself, what is wrong with us? Why are we so? On one hand, you were so deep in analyzing the social race issue, but incapable of understanding the cultural analysis. Many intellectuals in our community do not know how to analyze culture. And because of that, our political struggle has gone backwards now, because we don't know how to culturally analyze the new game of cultural warfare is waged against our people. And so for me, I'm saying to you, my sister, to you, my brother, at a certain point, your father belongs to us. I'm sorry to say this blatantly. I told Paul Robeson's son, called me at Howard, we took his name to create a Paul Robeson Award in Africa at the Ouagadougou Film Festival. My wife and me organized it. The son called me and said, who gave you permission to use my father's name? I told him, he is our father, not only yours. Unless you want to bottle and sell him and capitalism in his name. So for me, this whole separation has to happen. We have to know Nat Turner has also children, wife. In fact, I wrote a script once where the pregnant woman, his wife, listening to him being tortured next door, because that's historically fact. And so for me, the human aspect is very important. It's an amazing struggle that you both went. At the same time, you have to relinquish your father to us, so we could also advance what he lived for. The Maroon in him, I'm interested. The Maroon in him. And it's not to neglect, your biological relationship. It's very important that I admire you, I'm proud of you. How many kids are now the children of the big people? They're in court. Martin Luther King's kids are in court, trying to divide one gift into 10 people or something. Some man was the filmmaker from Senegal, his kids are in court. I could give you more names. But you guys worked on this material, this book. And it's, I'm thankful, I'm proud. I came to hear you because of that. The other part of it is in the discussion. I just want us to be a little bit democratic, academic, and I'm glad to meet a sister from Suriname. By the way, when I showed my film in Holland to Surinamese black people, they inducted me into the tribe. So I'm actually your brother.
Which tribe? We're all very different.
No, excuse me. Let's talk later, sister, because I think you will retreat back to a cave if you go to an absolute idea that Maroon means my slave. No, it doesn't mean.
Yes,
That's a
it does,
fact.
and you're not being very honest right now.
Excuse me.
Not.
You talk.
I know what the word means. I know. I've studied it. This is another great book that I would recommend you read. The word comes from the word Semanon you have.
Why do you even assume? Why do you assume I don't have that book? Why do you assume I don't have that book? Why are you Columbus who discovered everything?
I'm somebody who's called the Maroon, and as my
No, you're not. You're not.
From that
Only
country.
one. What's that story
Why
now?
would you deny my lived experience? That's
Listen,
outrageous.
what's his name? That Price. The Price family calls you Maroon. The Price family calls you Maroon.
No, the word
We knew
Maroon
you.
is dubbed
We knew you as the
British.
different communities, my sister. I was in Ghana with your family when they were meeting the Ghanaian family. So I'm saying,
My
I didn't.
family's from Benin and Togo.
Excuse
We
me.
know who we are.
Okay,
I'm
good.
telling you who we
Oh,
are, but you're saying,
other
this is
black
who I
people,
am.
the
That's
problem
my
is,
language. If Ugadawani means God willing. See
Okay,
the word? That's my language.
but let me tell you,
Speak it. I
let me tell
speak
you
it.
something,
I
my
love it.
sister. No, let me tell you one thing. I'm not disagreeing with you with your facts. Let me
You're
say this to
disagreeing
you.
with
No, excuse me. But don't say you're a special nigga in the middle of Negroes. That's bad language.
I'm asking
You're
you
not
to call me
special.
the N-word.
You're not special. You're not special. What I'm trying to tell you is all black people made history out of their circumstances. That's what I said.
offend you.
Okay.
What I
So
know
to me,
offends you.
excuse me.
And
I
that's
listen.
outrageous.
Excuse me. What I want to say is this.
Because you benefit.
Different black people, that's why I brought this. In different communities, black runaways, black Maroons call themselves different names, and you have it here. And it's more than this even. It's just in the film I'm working now that is part of the breakdown. But the point I want to say is this, folks, please. What I want to say is this. I think, for example, Africans would say to you, how come you didn't do this during slavery? And the problem here is they did not know what was done in that circumstances. That ignorance has to always be corrected. As far as I'm concerned, black people, African people, everywhere where they found themselves in circumstances, including the pirate history you brought, the Gulf of the whole New Mexico, in that whole Gulf, that history is still to be discovered, and they were all doing their best in the circumstances they found themselves. That's what makes it a powerful history. Africans in the Americas built a resistance history. In fact, I would even go as far as better than modern Africans. Not traditional old Africans, the Angola, the Zimbabwean, and all the, the traditional fighters, peasants, etc. I'm talking about modern Africa. Doesn't even have a chapter that Africans in America, from Brazil to this Deva. The other thing is, I don't say, Quilombo, for example. Where is it? Quilombo, for example. This is Angola, from Angola word. It means a secret society. It traveled all the way across the ocean to come to the Americas. And especially in Brazil, you find it. And so what we should say is that what I got up to say, I'm sorry, my sister, I'm sorry, everybody. What I got up to say is I think the Maroon story got lost, although that's what you were pushing earlier. The Maroon story, the fact that prisoners who were like the brother, maybe didn't have the opportunity, the circumstance to run. When they find him running, they named him, they labeled his running with the idea of Maroons. That's progressive, that's powerful, that's revolutionary for me. That's why I got up to speak. Thank you very much. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to hear conclusion part, we'll extend the time. If you want them to make a concluding remark, Paul, take it over.
I just want to hear from your young protege sister here.
The young freshman from Howard give us a hard time.
You're known around here.
I really appreciate your time and for giving me the chance to engage with you as well. I have many questions, but I would like to reduce it down to a comparison of time and generation. So I'm wondering about the view of the youth, the ignorance towards those who came before us, not knowing who is a political prisoner, who we need to direct our studies and our attention to, in comparison to your lived experience as youth, where you spoke of that disconnection between knowing who your father is in a different context that you then heard from other people. He did so and so. He's revered as so and so, right? I'm wondering how that compares to the present, as well as the difference in technological advances being AI, and how that works with governmental tracking of these freedom fighters, and what we as activists do to circle back and help them out or create movements forward. What are we looking for in this present moment? Are we looking for a new surge, a new wave of activism that would not disappoint in the way that Black Lives Matter did, where we had the state in that position where we could go back to our political prisoners? Are we looking for another chance at that? Or what does Maroonage look like in the context of a separate Black nation or separate spaces? What does it look like for us to move forward in an age where that AI and our attention away from books and literature, how AI can skew information as well, the dependency of my generation using that in academia and learning less and getting through their classes, that age of distraction that we're in, is that a difference? And then as well as with that tracking, is it still the same? Because it's like with this job of Maroons where you're like, we'll do that and we'll do it again. It's not a question, it's your duty, it's your responsibility. Is that the same thing? Like, yeah, they've been tracking us for ages, decades, it's the same thing. We're not threatened by AI, or is that new to you?
Go ahead, man.
That was
You wanted the young freshman? No, that was
a lot.
That was super dope. I'm ready, but go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm ready, so I'm gonna let him go. But to bring the AI in is particularly interesting, because I am a tech person. I do have a background in technology, and I'm also very security conscious, and cybersecurity is a big thing for me as well. So I think, with COINTELPRO, it's just a new COINTELPRO. It's probably a new COINTELPRO at a higher level that we haven't seen or experienced. And so the AI part, I think if we can find ways to use it to then bring about a new way of bringing about that need for young folks to see it from a different perspective. But I'm not sure how that all plays in, because I don't know where we're really going with AI in terms of movements. But you've opened up an interesting question with it, and now I'm going to think about it, in terms of that. But I'm not really sure, but I am very security conscious, and I think AI will make COINTELPRO look like, child's play, for sure. But I'm not sure if that's the angle you were actually asking. And again, it's something I really need to now consider and think about.
I like your angle around maybe an intergenerational question, or how things look for us versus how they look now. Was I hearing that correctly? Yeah, and so I'm intrigued with that, specifically in the context of me having relations and organizing with young people, having a daughter that's in college, and just looking and thinking like we're so different. Like we're alike, but we're very different. And I feel like even my mentees and young comrades who I work with, like we're just in different spaces right now. I'm in a space where I love the tech and all of that stuff, but I have a campaign that I'm putting out today. It's a fasting campaign. You start for 1 second. All you have to do is not do this thing for 1 second. Okay? All the way to where you throw it on the fucking roof. And I'm serious. Because we have to find better ways to communicate than this thing. You think you're communicating? Do you actually think that you're communicating with this?
And it's not being tracked in cyber and security and all of that.
All of the things, okay? And so I'm saying generationally wise, I'm feeling a little disconnect, but I did this at last year's here in Philly with Sinclair Skinner. I came to the Black Bitcoin conference and spoke, and I gave a whole thing on anti-tech. And I was surprised the room was like, and these are all tech people, like, yes, throw your phone on the roof campaign. I was like shocked. And I was looking, and these were tech people. And a lot of them were like, yeah, even though I work in it's a little bit much. And I need to find ways to create my own space away from my device. And people who constantly try to end the distraction of the device. It's a distraction. Am I answering the question? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm rambling, so I wanted to stop.
Well, yeah, I agree with the distraction devices and how even when we go away from nature and how we respond with our bodies of like the metaverse and all.
Yes.
We could probably be completely immersed in a world and be inside. We don't even need to go outside to be outside.
Yes.
Like that.
So look, we're going to use that as the ending. We're going to use it as a point of looking toward the future, but closing out tonight. Okay? I'm going to thank everyone for coming out. I encourage you to always support Sankofa. This is
Support
our
Sankofa.
Support
Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Support Sankofa.
Tonight by purchasing a copy of I Am Maroon or some other great book that you see. Thank everyone for being out tonight. Thank you for that discussion.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for this discussion. I learned a lot, and thank you for honoring us with your presence. Thank you, Sharon, for creating this space for all of us to be here and have these conversations. We love Sankofa, and we appreciate each and everybody that walks in here. With that in mind, I do want you all to come back. We do have a lot of events coming up. Please check out our website. We have film discussions, book discussions. We have retrospectives coming up. Tomorrow we have Gaza on Our Mind. It's a bi-weekly program that we have created for all creators in the DMV area or far away that would like to join us to come here and sing their song of solidarity with the people of Palestine, with what is going on right now. Last edition, we had Miko Peled, an Israeli-born journalist who has written books about this. We're going to have him back here on Wednesday to discuss 2 of his books. On Thursday, we have an arts exhibition, but the one I know that Haile is looking forward to, and I am looking forward to as well, is filmmaker Daniel Williams' retrospective, which is from Friday, October 4th to Sunday, October 6th. All 3 days we will be screening his film. On Sunday, we're going to have David White, a jazz musician, talented jazz musician who also went to Howard. He's going to be performing as well. So we do have a lot of events coming up. During the day, we're going to be celebrating Amiri Baraka, his 90th birthday, part 1 celebration with personal letters from Leroy, poetry reading, discussion, and recollections. So we do have a lot of events coming up. Please check out our website, and thank you again for joining us. Have a good evening.
Thank you. We need a clone of this one.
Book signing. Folks, the family can
Yes.
sign the books.
Okay. We can sign whatever books the folks are. You want to sign that?
Did they give y'all pens?
I have.
Thank you, man. This, you gotta hurry up, too. You gotta teach this, brother.
So, Doc, you
got lying, man. You got guess like say. That was great. Thank you so much. Truly blessed. Oh, God, it's amazing. Oh, yeah, you know, thank you so much.
So how do we get you? I'm sorry.
No, I want y'all, look, man, we could have.
Yeah, how do we get
I would love to. She is involved, yeah, no question about it. Thank you.
Actually, no, I did at some point, but, I'm involved.
She got your hand.
Yeah, so
Thank you for your
Yeah. So you know her and Ferguson and I know how you feel about the film, but if you have your mind out, you can take my information.
Yes, learn, oh my God.
Yes. Oh, I have to say it. Yeah. So people look like. So what yeah. So many events. Oh, brother, we thank you.
okay. You're gonna text me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Was that you?
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to is I have a brother information and all those things, but I tried to ensure that everything was on board, but then it got rejected. I wanted to get more involved. I want to power. It's really that.
Bring him, bring me too.
Right. And I was like, I just want to know.
I'm in here in DC, we're on the community college in South Florida. University is doing fantastic.
I wonder like where are there's and marshals or
Okay, give me your number.
those people that actually took a law and changed wouldn't look
So where are you in your law? Are you gonna go?
But me, I'm just grappling with where I want to go as a
I'll be in touch. Oh, take care. Thank you.
I just finished my master's, so now I'm looking like.
It's on and cracking it. It's on. Whatever I can do to support you, let me know. Reach out to me or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever I can do to support you.
Thank you so much.
But we need black women lawyers.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We need that.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say, to meet you all, say thank you. It's a blessing hearing you all and seeing you, and thank you for bringing all that energy. You know, I love it so much. Just really. Oh, absolutely.
We need that too.
Yeah. And I'm hoping I teach you this. Oh, you did? Yes. We got incorporated 4 high schools here teaching them about Africa and Pan-Africanism and, African language, everything. We had a good time. That was like 6 weeks. Yeah, so it was a wonderful experience. So we did things here in the area. We went to the African American grounds. To the African World Fair. It almost took me a sport. I was trying not to love that. Okay. It was amazing for them and us. We were able to run a mission there, prayer. It was just an amazing experience. And then we were able to do things here. many different things, and they just really loved it. So hearing this, but this is what this is about. Video. Right there.
I don't live here, so.
So I guess we have to do with what was it? Wire transfer?
I need your info either way.
Yeah, I mean, you can send it to me, something about you, I work here.
But I don't even know your name, so that. You have a card?
No.
Okay, so can you write it down?
I got it.
Mary, too, I can email you. Yeah. I'll email her, yes.
Yeah, so, but, thank you so much.
No, thank y'all, God. Just great, I wanted to shake hands, that's okay. No, thank you, I appreciate it, this is wonderful. Like I said,
What is your name?
Sharon.
Aaliyah?
Both sides of the story.
That's close to a name.
I can feel that is that's why I was like, okay.
Halima is,
I did it.
yeah. So Haliyah, not Halima. Haliyah, right? But Halima was a person who was like my baby.
It's a personal life, and then just the public life. It's like both, but it's still that personal.
And so spell Haliyah for me, brother.
But
That's
you know what I'm saying? So yeah, so
Thank you, sis.
yes, love you. Y'all keep fighting a good fight, okay? Alrighty.
Let me get a hug, bro. I'm glad you came.
I'm still on the AI. Oh, right. Okay. There's so much to wonder about there. I feel like that.
You have a little bit of time.
I do. All right.
Thank you so much. All right.
So, boo. Yes, we are taking pictures. They not so bad. They get pretty good nowadays with the It's not bad. It's one-on-one. It's one-on-one. It's one-on-one. Ooh. Come on, Tammy.
So you'll send them to us? No.
We standing behind the chair. Shouldn't somebody sit in the chair?
No, we can submit the
Yeah,
poster.
sit in the chair. Yeah, sit in the chair. Get the poster.
I'll hold it.
Get it around.
I got so much stuff in that chair. We got the poster. We want it longer.
Whose phone is that? You gonna send it to us?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries, you got a lot of pictures.
Okay, so Boo, are you eating or what? So are you eating what?
He was right.
I'm with the ladies in my life. Do you want anything to eat here? Do you want anything?
I gotta watch this stuff. I know, I see the same thing.
It's a nickname.
Okay, okay, cause I was about to bust out and say something. I was about to say something, but I'm glad I caught myself. Trying to catch the blood. I was cooking at home, trying to get my food and lunch and stuff together. Good job. Here you going. Okay, whatever you're doing. Alright, can you get a picture of me and her then? No, not like that. Can we get together? No, all three of us. No, you don't have to get up. I'm saying. Wait a minute, who you want to picture? This one. I know. Oh, wait a minute. Y'all don't want to be in this. You said you didn't want to get up, so stop playing. You said one thing and then say another. Who mine? Girl, it's so much. Yeah, that's it. That's your problem. You gotta say no more. Oh, wow. The way you are. Let me see. What happened? That's